get up, and on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
What's up, Kneecaps faithful? We are locked and loaded and flying into the sun on the doorstep of the total eclipse, Mr. Byrne.
Total eclipse of the heart, total eclipse of the podcast, whatever you want to, I'm sure that song will get played quite a bit on the day that a lot of people are going to hear this. So
yeah,
listen, Michigan being in 99% range of it, it'll probably just seem really dark.
Like a little bit of overcast coming over or something like that. We've all seen it, how the sun kind of just disappears behind a dark cloud and stays that way for about 5 minutes. Then it comes back like nothing even happens. So I'm not so sure what the big issue is.
So what was the last one? Was in 2018, 2017?
I think so.
So I remember I was covering a Lansing Lugnuts baseball game, and it happened mid-game, and it was like timed for that. So we had to take a little
eclipse
break. Yeah. So
I'm hearing about like even restaurants and department stores and what have you around the country that are actually like shutting down their hours of operation for like a half hour to an hour smack dab the middle of the day, just so their employees can go out and watch the eclipse. What kind of world are we living in?
Yeah, I didn't think that many things ran on solar power, Vince. So who knows?
Let's stay in our lanes here, Phil. This is another episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. I'm Vince Progar, Phil Burns across the way. Thrilled you could be part of our most recent venture into the Lions and the NFL happenings this week. One thing I do want to do is, because even though we don't claim to be, real high news, hard news, anything of that sort here on Kneecaps for Breakfast, but accuracy is still something that is important to me. And I do remember that I brought up last week that the Lions chose not to pick up the restricted free agency match on backup tight end Brock Wright. And I was misinformed. I couldn't even tell you what my source was, but says that they were not going to pick that up. And granted, the Lions waited until the last possible second. You have a 5-day window in order to match the restricted free agency offers, and I think they went right up to that deadline. But they did wind up matching the offer that the 49ers gave him. So, Phil, Brock Wright coming back next year.
Yeah, Mr. One play a game goes for a touchdown, Brock Wright. All jokes aside, hey, listen, financials being what they are, you'd rather have him on your team than have him go to the 49ers, right?
Who is arguably a team that you may wind up facing in next year's playoffs. So if you look at it that way, I'd rather have him on my team as opposed to the next guy's team.
Yeah, and his added ability as a blocker, I mean, it's really, really good and well worth the salary on just that physical trait alone. So I'm glad he's back in the fold. Obviously, like, you don't want to have him start any games because that would mean Laporta's out. This is very, very established to be Laporta's job. So I really only want to see him in 2 tight end sets out there, right? And not just being, the starter. But if worst case scenario, Laporta does, have an injury or something like that, I feel very comfortable with Brock Wright being the starting tight end. So glad to have him back. And the restricted free agency deals are always kind of goofy and how they get processed and the time structure for it and everything like that. But Brock Wright is back in the D.
And you know who else is back in the D for another go-around?
Who's that?
Mr. Face Mask, Mr. Vildor.
Oh, okay.
What could we possibly do without that guy?
Took me literally, I was like, is this a joke? Is this a punchline coming? Who's back? It's April.
Joke. No joke.
April in the D.
They might have even made that move on April Fool's Day. I'm not even sure. Yeah. But bottom line, Vildor coming back for another go-round at the corner position. So a couple of guys from last year's roster are going to be making their return. So less turnover than we originally thought on this Lions roster.
Yeah, so with his move, I think he's a good depth piece for what they have. I don't think it should really get to the point where he's starting any games for you, though. One guy that I do want to see play a little bit more was, is it Stephen Gilmore? It's not Stephon Gilmore.
Stephon's brother. Yep, Stephen Gilmore.
Yeah, yep, Stephen Gilmore. He played really well in preseason, so I think he, is a piece that hopefully can see the field a little bit more. Certainly in preseason,
I mean, I
but
wouldn't
kind of,
mind them bringing in Stephon Gilmore myself if I could have it
yeah,
both ways.
yeah.
Kind of
And
do
who
like a
knows, maybe
Gilmore to Gilmore type deal.
that will happen as we get closer to training camp or something like that. A lot of times vets don't want to go through the rigors of training camp and stuff. But
Until they know, or until they know what the teams are going to do with the draft and how
yeah,
they're going to approach
yeah,
certain things, and if there's even a need. Why walk away from one situation to another if they don't even
hmm
know what the picture is going to look like? So I think you're right, Phil. I think maybe from a free agency veteran standpoint, this might kind of be it until we get
yeah.
closer to July, even August, before things really start to happen again. Now that first flurry from March and early April is now kind of behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely all set sails are, headed towards the draft now.
So, as you and I have talked about over the course of the season, you and I go way, way back, Phil, in terms of talking about Lions and talking about sports. Heck, 15 years ago at this time, you and I were on the airwaves up in the greater Mount Pleasant, Michigan area on I don't even remember how many kilowatts that radio station was, but we were having basically this exact same conversation, 15, 16 years ago. And I kind of dubbed you the official Mel Kiper of the radio station, doing everything that you do with the draft. I mean, you dug deep into it back then. You're digging deep into it now. The only thing that I didn't get from you is you yelling "Todd, Todd," out of nowhere. But everything else is pretty much on par there. So I'm kind of gonna let you drive this
Yeah.
bus moving forward here, Phil. So you were able to compile from about 4 different media sources
hmm
different things that the Lions would do with pick number 29. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not assuming that trading out or trading up is an option. You're just saying what these people would say that they do if they hold pat at number 29. So you got, I think, four
Yep.
different media sources. I think about half of them agree and half of them don't, type of thing. So there is a little bit of a
hmm
variety in terms of who these people like and different routes that the Lions can take.
So yeah, exactly. So this is going to be if the Lions are sticking and picking at pick 29. In pretty much all of these that I saw, there was at least 3 quarterbacks going in the top 5. I think one of the drafts had both Marvin Harrison Jr. and what's his face,
The
the
Doomsday?
receiver out of LSU, the
Oh,
receiver out of
neighbors,
LSU,
Malik Neighbors.
neighbors, going like 4 and 5, um, in one of the mock drafts here. But go kind of by media outlet and first kind of get your take, and we'll kind of get there because as you're going to see, I've got 10 mock drafts here with the Lions picks. A lot of the names are similar. So it could just be they've got a hunch that these are guys the Lions are interested in. Could be that they think it's a good positional fit, good positional value for where they're at. But these are a lot of names that, quite honestly, as we get into this time of year, I think are getting floated out there. So these are good names to kind of keep in mind. Of course, we're not Brad Holmes. They're not Brad Holmes. And, sometimes these names we get so accustomed to seeing, and then Brad Holmes decides to trade around, and
Yeah, and
it's
he
worked so
drafts
far.
a quarterback or a running back in the first round and hits us over the head with a 2x4. I mean, it can go any way you can think of.
Uh huh. Uh huh. So we're going to start with NFL.com. We got 2 of them. The first one is coming in from Lance Zierlein. He has the
Any
Lions.
relation to Greg Zerline?
Hey, maybe. I think it's spelled the same way. Greg the Leg. Um, so Lance Zierlein has the Lions staying in the Big Ten and going into the defensive back position area, going Cooper DeJean from Iowa. Similarly, Bucky Brooks also has the Lions in the Big Ten with their pick, different side of the defense, still a defensive pick. He has the Lions going with Chop Robinson, the defensive end edge out of Penn State. So these 2 names, Cooper DeJean and Chop Robinson, little spoiler alert here, They're going to be involved in a couple more going forward. But before we move forward there, wanted to kind of get your take on these two guys. Obviously, probably I think just about everyone at this point is going to say defensive backfield and that other defensive end spot are probably the two biggest glaring weaknesses or possibilities for this pick. I think where most people would lean. What do you think about Cooper DeJean and Chop Robinson, Vince?
I like DeJean at 29. I think that he kind of exemplifies what Holmes and Campbell look for and kind of that tough guy, Big Ten defense kind of guy. He played on that Phil Parker defense for his years at Iowa, and what do they embody? They embody toughness in every sense of the word. So he's going to be a real good kid to have as part of that group that they're trying to build within the Lions organization. I think he's also proven that he's able to be a threat in the return game at times as well. He's kind of moonlit at kick returner. So especially with the new kickoff returns, with the new rule changes, he may be able to step in and give some competition and some added flexibility at the kickoff returner position as well. And I really like the idea of having competition in that defensive backfield room. I know we talked about Vildor coming back. I know Mosley is going to be coming back off that ACL. I know we have Carlton Davis coming over from the Buccaneers, but I feel like you need as much iron on iron competition in that defensive backfield room heading into the season. There's no doubt in my mind that it was at best a work in progress patchwork from last season, and I think that's something that really needs to be improved upon. So I'm liking that at number 29.
I think Cooper DeJean's an awesome fit for Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell, and I think he brings a lot of the toughness factor that they have. He's got good size, so a lot of the corners that kind of fall in between that late first and kind of early to mid second. There's a name on here that I'll reference later on when we get to it. Tend to be a little bit on the smaller side. I don't think you have that issue with Cooper DeJean. I mean, he can play physical, so I think he would be a good fit.
And as I recall, he didn't draw a whole lot of PIs when he was at Iowa as well. So anytime you're able to get guys that aren't super handsy without making any type of real impact on the game is, in my mind, a plus. So DeJean at 29, I like. As it pertains to Chop Robinson, my issue is that everything that I've calculated and everything I've looked at has him going about 15 to 20 picks earlier than 29. So the question I have is, if Chop Robinson falls to you at 29, why is that? Is there maybe some type of undisclosed injury that didn't check out? Maybe when he did some medicals at the combine, something was uncovered or discovered that maybe some teams were comfortable with. There could be something as far as that goes. Because, like I said, this guy has 10 to 15 overall pick written all over him.
Yeah. So with him, his production isn't really there as far as sack totals, but he does have the measurables with the 40-yard dash time. I think it was around 4.4, maybe 4.5, kind of in that range. He is very, very fast, and I think would offer more down versatility than what they get with like James Houston, where it's really only going to be a pass rush, right? It probably coming on third down with Houston. Now, that being said, I don't think he would be the number one guy if I'm going defensive end that I would want. I think at 29, you're right. Like, I think that's really good value to get him there. And again, these are the ones we're going through. These are all things where the Lions are not in a trade up scenario. So it's not like they're making this pick at 12 or something like that, but I like Jared Verse. Like, I think the guy from Florida State, I think he just offers a well balance of what you would want. But again, it's the same thing. Like, I just don't think he's going to be there at 29. So
if he is there, I almost wonder if there's a reason for that. And again, I agree with everything you said about the type of player that he is. In that Manny Diaz defense, he was a disruptor, no doubt about it. I think, like you said, an upgrade from James Houston, which I've said it before, I'm not exactly sure why they're putting all this blind faith in him to be the guy after 7 solid outings. I think they need as much assistance on that front end of the D-line as possible, but if he's there at 29 and everything checks out and there's no concerns of character or injury or whatever the case may be, then yeah, I think it's great value at 29. I just not sure,
Yeah.
like you said already, if he's going to be there at that point.
Mm-hmm. So to put a bow on it, again from NFL.com, Lance Zierlein has Lions selecting Cooper DeJean, cornerback from Iowa, and Bucky Brooks has Lions selecting Chop Robinson, defensive end from Penn State. So staying in the Big Ten with those two picks from NFL.com.
And 2 for 2 on defense.
2 for 2 on defense. And yeah, hey, I'm not going to spoil anything. We'll keep it moving. We'll keep it moving. Like I said, some of the names are just going to be similar, so we're just putting together a candidacy pool basically for where we think the Lions might go according to the experts here. Next media outlet that we're going to the worldwide leader, the mothership, ESPN. Not the Ocho. Todd, who unfortunately no longer is with ESPN
That's right.
as part of their media cut. So these are some different names than we've seen in the past, and we don't have Mel Kiper among this list. So I think his stuff is fully locked in the premium content, and I am not an ESPN insider, so not getting me.
So what is that? Is that like the double paywall or something? I don't even know where that comes in.
That's the we got to pay Mel Kiper, to
keep that hair looking good, right?
Yeah. What others? But I think it was back in the quarantine draft. He had a really, really fake looking green screen set behind him. The computer that was like in the background. I was like, that's not a real computer. That computer has not existed since 1996. Like what? I get that he's old school, but come on.
I think the two things that I'll always take away from the quarantine draft is going to be the Roger Goodell sweaters and Bill Belichick's dog. Everything else is just kind of background to me.
Hey, and Goodell's got a nice chair. Say what you will about the guy. He's got a great furniture eye. Great.
It just meant that the bro hugs had to be twice as hard in 2021.
Yeah, it was probably Mrs. Goodell. Let's be honest. Anyways. All right, let's move it on here. So first one that we have, a pretty recognizable name from ESPN if you followed their stuff for a long time now. Field Yates, who's kind of stepped into a little bit of the Mel Kiper role. He does a lot of the fantasy content for ESPN. Field Yates, Lions picking at 29. Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa. So that is 2 mock drafts that we now have with Cooper DeJean going to the Lions at pick 29.
Don't hate it.
Next one, Matt Miller. I believe he used to be at Bleacher Report a couple years back, but he's been at ESPN for a couple years now. He's kind of one of their draft experts, very similar to what we had from NFL.com. He goes Chop Robinson, defensive end from Penn State. So there's a third name in here, and we're going to get a wild card thrown in. This isn't all just Cooper DeJean and Chop Robinson. I would have hopefully told you up front and not have you waste 25 minutes of your valuable listening.
Hey, we're 4
deep,
6 to go, so let's see what we got here.
At some point, they were going to put me on 2.5 speed or something like that. They're like, Phil, come on, get on with it. What are we doing here?
Get to the point, bro.
Mike Tannenbaum. Hey, he used to be the
Christmas
Jets
tree himself.
Manager. Yeah. I think I'm gonna butcher this name, but I'm gonna give it my college effort here. Mike Tannenbaum, pick 29, has the Lions staying on the defensive end, going Leatu Latu, the defensive end edge from UCLA. So the big takeaway for me is that we, of course, have 2 other people going Cooper DeJean and Chop Robinson as well. And I think if that kind of stays true to form at this point in April, unless something comes out about those 2 guys, those are popular names for the Lions. And, I think a couple things that I would say definitely helps in, Cooper DeJean's favor is the Jack Campbell, Matt Laporta. Lions are not afraid to pick from Iowa. They like picking from Iowa. I think it fits into a lot of their blueprint and DNA. So keep that in mind, I guess, with Cooper DeJean. at pick 29 moving forward throughout the rest of April.
I want to get your thoughts real quick. I
Yeah.
know you kind of put this all together. I'm curious as to what Tannenbaum liked about the UCLA kid over a Chop Robinson, for instance. What was some of his rationale given there? The reason I'm asking is because
Yeah.
I personally tend to shy away a little bit from defensive players out of the Pac-12 just because most of the teams that they play don't really view defense as much of a priority. There's so many points and yards given up on offense in that league that it just seems like, okay, he might be the best player on his own team. He
Yeah.
might be one of the best players in his own conference, but could he really hold a candle in terms of production value up against a handful of other guys at his same position over the course of college football?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with those guys out of the Pac-12, it's just a case of pure athleticism, that they have to
Or projections or
yeah.
whatever the case is.
Exactly. Let me get down to hear what Tannenbaum had to say. So here we go. This is what Tannenbaum has to say on Laiatu Alatu, the edge from UCLA. Latu has great get-off speed and fundamentals. He had 23.5 sacks in his 2 seasons with UCLA. Biggest question about this point will be medical related. Latu suffered a neck injury at Washington that forced him to medically retire in 2020 before transferring and returning to the field 2 years later. But the skill and production are absolutely there. So that is, of course, one of the issues as well with Latu is that injury. And then, he was a transfer over to UCLA. Listen, Brad Holmes has proven he, is not shy about taking guys that have an injury risk. But I would have to say of the names that we've gone through so far, that would be the one that I would be, on to this point. I think from what I've read, and I can't say I've necessarily watched a lot of his tape or really even watched that many UCLA games going last year. I think just people talked about him being a top 20 pick, but again, when you're talking about a serious neck injury and stuff like that, that is a little bit of a risk reward that I think you're going to have other guys like a Cooper DeJean, for instance, that a clean bill of health and like I'd tend to venture on that just because a couple of the guys that we've picked on the defensive line already have already had those kind of injury risks and have just taken a long time to kind of get into the fold. And I just don't think you need 3 or 4 of those guys to be high picks.
And see, Phil, my thing about this pick is I know you mentioned the 23.5 sacks, but it seems like in a conference that has so many mobile quarterbacks that even if you get a quarterback keeping the ball, scrambling, going east and west, and turns upfield, and even 10 to 15 yards worth of running on a scramble play gets stopped a yard short of the line of scrimmage, that goes in the book as a sack. Yeah. So it's not like there's this superb amount of penetration, a superb art of pass rush that this guy gives you. I've seen plenty of UCLA games, and a lot of them are shootouts and a lot of chase the quarterback around. So I think looking at, just from a sack production standpoint might inflate what this guy brings you a little bit. That's a very good call out, though, on the extensive injury, because as you pointed out, Phil, and as we know very well, Brad Holmes is not above a reclamation project by any stretch. I guarantee you that the injury history does not scare him one bit. And I think from a value standpoint, I can absolutely see him looking past any type of injury, looking at the projections and thinking if I can get this guy at 29, that's the route I'm going to take. Now, I also know that Brad likes to take more of a best guy available type thing. And is he the best guy at any position? I'm not exactly sure. He might not even be the best guy at the defensive line position available, knowing that he takes that all-encompassing view of the draft board. That seems like a little bit of a reach by Tannenbaum there at 29. Just my 2 cents.
Then 2 things that really frighten me about that: medically retire in 2020. We're in the year 2024. And okay, yes, he's healthy and he's back playing, but
this is the NFL. Guys run faster and hit harder, and it's not even the same thing.
Oh, he's on the older side as well, So it's not the quarterback position, which I have no issue with older players. In fact, I would almost welcome an older player at the quarterback position with how old that you can play that position now.
Look
It's been
at
proven.
Brandon
But
Whedon. Wasn't he about
yeah.
30 when he got drafted?
Yeah. Thanks, Vince, for throwing that take under the bus there. Hey, is he still in the league? I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's like some team's like third stringer at this point.
I think he's a spokesman for AARP at this point.
Wilford Brimley died. He's just taken over diabetes.
Diabetes.
I hope he doesn't have diabetes. I don't know. I don't know where I went with that. So anyways,
Moving on.
ESPN. Again, to recap. Field Yates, Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa, Matt Miller, Chop Robinson, defensive end, Penn State, Mike Tannenbaum, Laiatu Latu, defensive end, UCLA. So that was ESPN. We've gone through NFL.com. We've gone through ESPN. We still have CBS, and we still have Fox Sports left to go. For CBS, moving along, we have Chris Trapasso. He is going back to the well for the defensive back position, but a new name has entered the fold, and a player not from the Big Ten and not from the Pac 12, or what used to be the Pac 12. A name that I know will be popular probably come draft night if this player is still on the board. Because let's just be honest, we got to get the Kool-Aid guy in Detroit some way, somehow. Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. How you feeling on that one, Vince?
He'd easily have the coolest name on the team. I mean, now that CD Deuce isn't around anymore, I think drinking the Kool-Aid could be a huge marketing opportunity for the Lions organization. The only thing that we got to do is find somebody that goes by the nickname of Cornbread, and we'd be all for it.
Yeah, just imagine pass breakup, big hit, interception.
All joking aside, though.
Up on the
See, the opportunities are endless. I'm telling you, there's so many different ways that this marketing team that I'm sure is handsomely paid for their ideas and their intel, they can have a riot with it. And same with the fans. But honestly, though, Phil, as much as I've watched Kool-Aid McKinstry over the years, I mean, Alabama gets as much TV time as just about anybody in college football. So a lot of tape out on the guy, a lot of court of public opinion data on the guy. It just seems to me that he's not even the best corner on his own team.
No, he's not.
And I think that when it comes to making the big play when he needs to, it just seems like the moment kind of escapes him. He's definitely not a guy who I would put out there as CB1. If anything, I think at least early on, until he's able to establish himself in the NFL, I think he still has to maybe be looked at more of a number 2 guy or a depth piece at this point. I'm just not sure that he's got the chutzpah, if you will, to kind of be that lockdown number 1 that this team, I think, needs just about as badly as anything else.
So I think a lot of what he is a little bit of a microcosm that we saw at Alabama, last season, where you've heard of plenty of the players' names and the hype that came with them and all 5-star recruits across the board, but there's just something missing. It wasn't quite there. I think he's got the talent to make an impact on the Lions defense, though. Like, even if it's not flashy, if it's not big play inducing, I think he would be pretty solid with us, and I think he would be able to contribute right away, which, even though the Lions roster and depth is really, really good at this point, I think that's kind of what everyone is looking for at the end of the day is
he second contract good, though?
See, that's the issue that you run into, and when you're picking there and you're thinking about long-term and stuff, those are things that Brad Holmes are going to kind of keep in mind. So again, Chris Trapasso, Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. Moving on, we have a new name entering the fold, Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports. Similar last name, different first name, Darius Robinson, the local kid, defensive end for Missouri. He's got a little bit more size than Chop Robinson. I think there was a story, if I remember right. It was Nick Fairley, I think, that when he was a kid, he met and like Nick Fairley convinced him to play football or something like that when he went out to the Lions training camp in Allen Park. So I kind of feel like Darius Robinson would be a pretty popular pick as well, and one that the
Not to
stories
mention
would come out.
a full circle type of thing too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think he was Southfield. Was A&T Southfield?
Southfield A&T. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's where he originally started his high school ball at. So again, Ryan Wilson, Darius Robinson, defensive end, Missouri, and
That's
the third
another
and
Brad
final.
Holmes pick. If you
Yeah,
ask me, I mean that
yeah.
Missouri defense had a phenomenal year last year, and
Mm-hmm.
really the big adjective I'd take away from how their defense plays was just bruising. They were a
Yeah.
bunch of they were a bunch of dogs out there on that defense. It's no, I mean, did you see how grand it was against the taxi squad? But do you see what they did to Ohio State in the bowl
Yeah.
game, holding
Yeah.
them to 3 points, and they
Yeah.
ran roughshod through that SEC. I think
Mm-hmm.
Eli Drinkowitz is building a heck of a powerhouse down there at Mizzou, and that defense was phenomenal last year. And he same exact thing. I think just a real tough kid, kind of like what we were talking about with DeGene earlier. Has a lot of those same qualities. And I didn't even know the story about Nick Fairley and the
Yeah.
Lions. And if there's one thing that Holmes and Campbell also like, it's guys who give you that little extra bit of intangibles. And if this guy has a built-in desire to play for the Lions over
Mm-hmm.
maybe 31 extra teams, they're going to use that to their advantage and do what they can to tap into this guy's potential with the
Mm-hmm.
fact that he bleeding that Honolulu blue every step of the way already going into it.
Mm-hmm. Next name for CBS Sports, Pete Prisco, longtime veteran for CBS Sports. Covered the Jaguars quite a bit while I was kind of down in that area. Ran into him a couple times. He doesn't remember me, and I don't really remember him, but I just remember seeing him.
So what you're saying is that if you delivered a pizza to his house, he wouldn't even think twice about it.
No. Yeah. But he also has Darius Robinson, defensive end from Missouri, going to the Lions at pick 29. So pretty common element there for what they're thinking for that one. Let me read you a real quick bit on a couple of the takes here on Darius Robinson. Pete Prisco's bit says why they signed Marcus Davenport in free agency to a 1-year deal. They need more help. Darius Robinson could be a major steal in the spot, playing opposite Aiden Hutchinson. And then also Ryan Wilson goes, Darius Robinson quietly had a dominant season for the Tigers and followed that up with a not so quiet Senior Bowl week where he can play both as an edge rusher or kick inside. I don't care that he ran a 4.95 second 40-yard dash at the combine. He's 6'5", 285 pounds with 34.5-inch arms and a 35-inch vertical. So again, 40-yard dash when you're a defensive end, maybe not the most important thing. Although that is something that is kind of favoring into some of these Chop Robinson picks, but not so much for Darius
Especially
Robinson.
if you keep in mind, you're going up against quarterbacks that are speedsters. I mean, Jordan Love, quick on his feet. Caleb Williams going to be quick on his feet. The Minnesota Vikings aren't going to have Sam Darnold as their quarterback forever. They're probably going to get a guy with some speed. So a slower guy maybe isn't the route you want to take.
Yeah, and I think the thing is I think a lot of people have been mocking J.J. McCarthy to the Vikings, or kind of in that range. A couple of the other guys, Michael Penix Jr. could be there without a trade up or anything like that for their second pick. So I mean, that's another guy with some speed, with some wheels to keep in mind there. Okay, so to wrap up for CBS, again, Chris Trapasso, Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback Alabama, Ryan Wilson, Darius Robinson, and Pete Prisco, Darius Robinson. So we've gone through NFL.com, ESPN, and CBS so far.
So 4 of the media outlets down, 1 more to go. And the common theme has been it's either been a corner or it's been a non-interior defensive line position. So, Phil, the question is, are we going to get guys agreeing on the same guy, or is it going to be 2 different guys? Or is it going to be something that's going to be outside those positions? Bring us home, buddy.
It's wild card time because you got 2 new names entering the fold. I give that away first. We go finally to Fox Sports. Jason McIntyre has Nate Wiggins, cornerback from Clemson, with his pick. And we touched on the Missouri defense a little bit already. Fox Sports' Rob Ring has Ennis Rakestraw, cornerback Missouri, at pick 29. So, admittedly, I really haven't seen Wiggins play that much. I've seen his name thrown out there a little bit. Rakestraw, my biggest concern is size. I think he's a little undersized. Now, in today's NFL, you can do a lot with just pure, ball skills and pure tenacity and hustle. And Lions already kind of have a couple guys like that back there, in my opinion. But one thing about Ennis Rakestraw is I think he would be an awesome kind of Dan Campbell kind of guy.
I'm with you though, Phil. The whole undersized corner thing doesn't really sit well with me when you go up against Justin Jefferson 2 weeks out of the year. I think in terms of like what you're getting with Amik Robinson, who's coming in at 5'8", Mosley's not the tallest guy in the world. Carlton Davis isn't really known for his size necessarily. I think if you're gonna, unless the guy's just gonna blow you away with what he brings you with the intangibles and his toughness and whatnot, the whole undersized corner thing doesn't really get it done for me.
Yeah, no, I agree there. In his write up, Rob Ring of the Lions pick of Ennis Rakestraw says Rakestraw won't earn any first round grades or won't earn many first round grades from every NFL team, but he plays with the degree of physicality that head coach Dan Campbell requires. And then for Wiggins, I think Jason McIntyre more or less kind of did the default, like, no comment really on the player itself and just said
The
they
Lions need a
grabbed
corner.
Carlton
The end.
Davis. Basically, they grabbed Carlton Davis in free agency, but his play over the last 2 seasons has been down a bit from when they won the Super Bowl. So one ticket to Vague City. Don't have much to go
I mean,
on
I
with that
will
one.
tell you this: Clemson has not been the Clemson of old these last couple of
No.
seasons, but the reason that's been the case is because their offense hasn't scored enough points. The defense has actually held up pretty impressively over the last couple of years. Do I think that's worth using first round capital over? I mean, he seems like a guy who second or third round could still be sticking around. Corners tend to be pretty deep in most drafts, and I can't foresee this draft being any different.
Yeah. So to kind of put a bow on all the selections, I'll kind of run through this down and then we'll tally up and kind of figure out who the most popular was. We pulled from 10 different sources here for mock drafts that were done in the last week and a half. Obviously, these names are probably going to, change a little bit as we get a little bit closer to April, but really kind of good to kind of get some names of possible candidates for Lions at 29 out there. Going back to the very first two that we talked of from NFL.com, Lance Zierlein, no idea if related to Greg or not. Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa. Bucky Brooks, Chop Robinson, defensive end, Penn State. ESPN, Field Yates, Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa. Matt Miller, Chop Robinson, defensive end, Penn State. Mike Tannenbaum, Laiatu Latu, defensive end, UCLA. CBS, Chris Trapasso, Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. Ryan Wilson, Darius Robinson, defensive end, Missouri. Pete Prisco, Darius Robinson, defensive end, Missouri. And Fox Sports, Jason McIntyre with Nate Wiggins, cornerback, Clemson, and Rob Rang, Ennis Rakestraw, cornerback, Missouri. Most popular team is Missouri with three selections for 2 players coming across there. Darius Robinson in 2 of the mocks, both from CBS. Chop Robinson also in 2 of the mocks, one from NFL.com and one from ESPN. And Cooper DeJean also in 2 of the mocks. So the most popular names out there and kind of this general consensus would be Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa, Chop Robinson, defensive end, Penn State, and Darius Robinson, defensive end, Missouri. All defensive players in these mocks. And I think as we get closer, that is probably where we're leaning. I think a lot of people believe that there could be a receiver or 2 that, if you really want one, could possibly still be there at the second round selection.
So let's say that out of those three names that got the most amount of love from a lot of the draft pundits in the media, if they were forced to take any one of those three players and only one of those three players, okay, I
Mhm.
think the Lions have an improved defense by adding any of those three guys into the fold. I think
Yeah.
they're all three of them are guys that can step in and make an immediate impact on the defense. I think all of them can make a case for being Lions guys, Lions culture guys. And I think that's definitely a big approach that the Lions take to drafting. Are they culture guys? Are they Lions guys? So I can see any of those three guys coming in, making a difference, and improving upon that defensive unit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the combine. People already know what a lot of these players are going to run. So the Lions, like a lot of these other teams now, are really using it as the opportunity to get to meet with the player and figure out if they're going to fit in the locker room, if they're going to fit into their culture. There's some awesome videos that the Lions media team put together last combine, after the Lions picked the players. And I'm really looking forward to whenever they do release that kind of stuff this offseason, what that always looks like. They do a fantastic job with all of that. Um, I'd have to say, if I am the Lions, based on these mocks and kind of how I'm feeling, I think I would kind of lean towards Darius Robinson. I think he fits a lot of what you want from um, textbook opposite starting defensive end from a skill set, measurables. I think he has the blueprint that you want. And I think the value of selecting a defensive end in the first round is a little bit higher than a cornerback. I think, uh, um, sometimes you can find a starting cornerback in the second or third round that can
Well, yeah,
still
and
make an
like we
impact.
said, that tends to be one of the more deep positions
Yeah.
in draft year in and year out.
Yeah. So, but we're getting closer. Those are some of the names that we're going to see out there. And of course, these are all mocks where the Lions are picking at 29. There are mocks out there that have the Lions, trading up if there is a player that falls or whatever. But, um, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a pick and stick kind of scenario for the Lions where they're just going to let the draft fall to them. So anyone that is going downtown this year thinking that the Lions are going to trade into the top 10, I would venture on the side of being very disappointed. So if you're going downtown, you're going to get an opportunity to boo Caleb Williams at number one going to Chicago.
You just better be having your
You
coffee
know,
about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon because your team's not going to be picking until probably 10:45, 11 o'clock, 11:15, something like that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So,
But no, that's great
uh,
stuff, Phil. Great job putting that package together, and that kind of gives us a view of what the national media kind of thinks that the Lions are going to do, assuming they do hold tight at number 29. You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Phil Byrne, that's that guy. Thrilled you could be with us for this latest episode. And what I kind of want to do, Phil, to kind of end things tonight is just kind of discuss the Lions draft philosophy. And we kind of touched on it earlier on in the episode. And all this is fine and great about how the Lions need help at corner. The Lions need help on the outside of that defensive line. There's no question about that. But Brad Holmes, in his comments at the NFL meetings a few days back, kind of touched on his philosophy. And he doubled down more or less when asked about it, in that he does not believe in drafting for need. He believes in taking the best player at any position on his draft board based on where he happens to be picking at that time or where he has a good avenue to possibly trade up. Or if he has a really, really good offer to trade back a little bit like he did this year, pick up some fun coupons as they were as it pertains to draft picks, and under the assumption that one or two of his guys are still going to be at that point, then that makes the trade down thing a little bit more valuable. So, Phil, I want to get your thoughts a little bit on what do you think of that philosophy instead of necessarily filling points of need, going for the best overall player and letting the rest of it kind of fall into place at that point.
well, I think one thing that you can always kind of do, especially as you're a team that is really starting to, progress towards the that upper echelon of the NFL on a consistent and annual basis, is we touched on it. Like Stephon Gilmore, is that a kind of guy the Lions could target to bring in? Does he still have starting capability? Okay, well, if so, and if you think you can get him or someone like that, it takes away any sort of ability to have to draft for positional need. Now, that being said, you also know how the Lions roster is constructed. And if you are simply going off of what you want to spin as the best player on your board, well, if for some reason Michael Penix Jr. was the best player on your board at pick 29, I don't think the Lions at this point in time would use a first round pick on a quarterback. I think they're pretty set in stone with what they've got.
We have seen them take a first round pick on an off ball linebacker as recently as last season. So I guess really anything is possible.
Anything is possible, but I think, there is some probably within reason. Like, I think they're probably pretty well set at the running back position. Like, I don't really see any scenario where, if I don't even think this is a strong running back draft, or who I would even think really would be a late first round pick at this point. But, I think
what about Blake Corum?
All right. Maybe in the third. I don't know. Not for the Lions though, but no, I mean, he's a good running back, but yeah, like I just think that it is, I think it is a great way to build your team, but I think once it's built, at some point, you don't want to, like, you do need to address some needs at some point. I think one thing that is kind of interesting is, like, look at what the Philadelphia Eagles have done in the last couple of years, and they have drafted guys from Georgia, maybe when that hasn't necessarily been the top need, but a lot of times in the first and second round, they're getting a guy from Georgia that kind of fits their MO and kind of fits what would appear to be the best player on the board with the way that the draft has fallen. So I think it's an interesting strategy, and I think the Lions are doing that to some degree, but I think at pick 29, it's a little bit different than, if you're picking in the top 10.
And history shows that the Lions tend to favor offense with some of their earliest picks in the draft. And I found it kind of interesting, Phil, going back to the little thing that we did with collecting the data from the various media outlets and where they're mocking him at 29, that there wasn't even a hint of offense in there whatsoever. So maybe Brad Holmes has us all fooled, maybe not.
It is a good point. Brian Thomas Jr., the receiver from LSU, if he was there at pick 29, you could make an argument that he's the best player on the board. He fits the physicality and the size that we don't really have on the team, but it's also a name that I really haven't seen mocked to the Lions at this point. Like, if they're going offense, a lot of times it's for an offensive guard, but now I think they've kind of got
especially with Kevin Zeitler coming aboard a couple of weeks ago. It went from being one of those need points to where I could definitely see a bunch of guys mocking a guard to the Lions. Now, ever since that signing, it seems like all the offensive lineman discussion has all but disappeared.
Yeah, without a doubt. So it's tending to kind of look, at least through the mocks, that the candidate pool that they're kind of putting together for pick 29 is going to look on the defensive side of the ball. Whether that's the defensive line or the defensive backfield kind of remains to be seen.
So we're going to talk moving forward about maybe more in depth about what the Lions are going to do, maybe at some of their later rounds, kind of touch on what some of the other teams, local or the teams in the division, are going to do as well, and maybe also discuss the likelihood of some trades, because the majority of our conversation tonight has been, what are the Lions going to do if they stand pat at 29? We'll, moving forward, look into what the likelihood is of them trading up for a guy, what the likelihood is of them trading out of the first round altogether and acquiring some more draft capital because, as you know, Phil, especially when you're trying to build a team through the draft, there's no better way to do that than by making some solid moves while at the same time picking up more draft capital on the way up.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And who's to say the Lions even stay in the first round? And all the people going down there expecting the Lions pick in the first round, Brad Holmes is like, hey, you know what? Thanks for coming.
But would Brad Holmes really flip a double bird to his loyal fan base like that? That's what I'd like to know. I think he's got to at least give the people what they came for. Now, whether it is trading up and we get the pick early, or it's something that he did last year and gets 2 first-round picks out of the deal and gives the fans some double pleasure there, I can't believe he's going to go out and screw his own like that.
Quick plug for the Lions draft party: $40 gets you inside Ford Field draft night. That'd be fun. Hey, that'd be great. Hey, here's my $40, and let's just go watch all 31 other teams make some picks here.
Let's hope it doesn't come down to that. Well, that's the story here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We are thrilled that you were able to be along for the ride with us. Next week and the following week, it's just going to be draft as we get ever closer to the last Thursday in April as NFL Draft 2024 coming to you from the 313. Good show tonight, buddy. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.